I've always been asked, what made you want to be an architect? I decided when I was 8 years old. I loved to draw, and my parents were both engineers. That mindset of applying metrics to predict outcome was the ethos of our household. If things went wrong, it was because someone had not planned well enough. The artistic side of me always loved making things, drawing, sewing, models. In the sheltered context I live in, my ideals could become their own reality through a creative medium. My context was safe and uninhibited, even bucolic. As I grew up, I lived in different contexts. When I decided to become an architect at age 8, we lived on the coast in Australia. I walked to school every day with my neighbor. When my family moved back to PA, we lived on a farm, surrounded by woods and cows. When I moved to college, I lived in cities. It was all invigorating. What fascinated me was how different buildings, streets, infrastructure, and amenities in different contexts created these wonderful urban environments. I wanted to study this, to see what needed to come together to make some of my favorite places, to give this life and vibrancy. I moved to Boston to study architecture and urban design. I found that cities were overlays of systems, cultural values, innovation of a particular time, then made over and over again. The realities of the city are fused in the built environment. In an academic setting, we were encouraged to form our own ideals about our practice of architecture. This bubble of ideals was suddenly deflated by the recession. This was my college graduation in 2009. The economy had just crashed and architects were being laid off in droves. It was this context, though, in which I had to start my career. I decided to lay low, come back to York, tackle the manageable amount of student debt I had at the time by working about 3 minimum wage jobs. The hustle was real, but I lived in downtown York. As unsettling as this time was, my return to York cultivated something in me. I believe it was then that I decided to stay in York. Downtown was revitalizing, and there was actually great architecture here. So I decided to go back to grad school in Portland, Oregon, studying sustainable urban design. I moved away, knowing I would move back. In becoming an architect, I noticed this tendency in our field. It's kind of frightening, the ability to feed a certain God complex in people. One of my deepest fears was always becoming this kind of intellectual elitist, not able to relate to people. So instead, I found my sweet spot in taking something derelict and completely transforming it. This is when Clint and I met, painting a hallway at Rudy Art Class. It was in the midst of honing in on this motivator for my career that I met him. While my upbringing taught me to be this hyper planner, Clint helped me grow my risk-taking side. Clint shared this love for creating things that seemed impossible. He wasn't scared of something like this, our house renovation here in the city. He'd just roll up his sleeves and face it. I also get asked a lot what it's like to be an architect. It's really nothing like what I dreamed of when I was 8. When I was 8, I didn't dream of being the lead architect on a county jail. But as it turns out, I'm really good at coordinating intense construction projects. I also get asked, what's it like to be a woman in a male-dominated field? I found if I can be solution-oriented, I have this opportunity to really curb the pissing matches. This jail had 10 prime contractors, 70 workers, and there was me coordinating construction. So I'm pretty proud of this project. I have to keep re-asking myself, what is the York I want to live in? What opportunities do I want to create for other people? I try to start with the widest vision, and then the constraints of budget, socioeconomic disparities, and bureaucracy will all set the limitations. This uncomfortable zone between vision and constraint is precisely where I live, practicing architecture and urban design. Look at the real, think of the ideal. Pitch the vision, then identify barriers to address. This can be heartbreaking as a process. Right now, I'm working on a project to transform the Cadorus Creek. Right now, the creek is an eyesore, a threat, neglected. There's such vivid tension between the real and the ideal in this project. The project has so many constraints, unknowns. Water is dynamic. At times it's pleasant, at other times it devastates the city. A project like this cannot be solely accomplished with vision. It also cannot be solely accomplished with the constraints of engineering. It really can only be accomplished when vision is embraced with equal fervor to the constraints. So what are our constraints? A limited window of time, aggressive funding pursuits, and a monstrous permitting path. And the biggest, convincing all of the people from all the different entities that need to buy into the vision. So I asked myself, why am I so drawn to these impossible types of projects? It's this. There's a keen sense of duty and passion to see something good come out of something that's broken. There's a rigor to creating something that gives the city life. There's really no shortage of decaying buildings and infrastructure here. It's easy for me to walk into a building like this and see mold and water damage. But where I have to focus my mind's eye is seeing what could be, casting the vision. My craft can best be defined as this constant dance with the real and the ideal.